Okay, this is for the snowboard illustration. At this point, you've sized up your artboard to the size that you recommended. Mine's 163. I brought in an image by going File, Place, finding the image that I'm going to use to indicate with my pen tool. I'll just lock this layer and design a layer 2. For grade 12, you should know how to do this really quickly. Get my pen tool, and I'm going to get rid of my smart guides here. I'm going to click and drag a nice, beautiful shape. And let me just, for demonstration purposes here, just change the color of my line art so you can see what's happening. And I'm happy with that. And I'll show you why. I just hide this for a sec. So I have this line segment. And what I'm going to do here is transform and reflect. And I'm just going to press preview here, and we're going to do a horizontal copy. Now, depending on the design, I'll bring my sketch in here, or sketch or photograph, sorry. Okay, got 2 line segments there, and most likely what I'm going to do is combine this shape. So check this out. I have started off with 1 line segment. I reflected it, put over top. I'm going to do the same for the other side, but before I do, I'm going to play with this a bit. In particular, there's some issues here, and I know that. So check this out. I'm going to go to Object and Expand. So it's no longer a line, it's going to be a fill. With these 2 objects, I'm going to get my Pathfinder tool, and I'll just pop this off to show you. And straight up, I'm just going to divide it. So that's the tool to use, is divide. So what that does, any intersecting lines, in this case, if I go to View and Outline, you can see that there's going to be some riffraff here, and I'm going to trim and delete that stuff. So I'm going to select both. I'm going to say divide. Any lines that are intersected actually trim each other. But to get rid of the excess, you got to go Object and Ungroup. Click on the part that you wanted to delete. Command 0. Now I have that nice shape. However, these are now broken line segments. A really nice trick to do with the Pathfinder tool is to press Command A, select everything, and weld them back together, or unite them back together, and voila, you have that shape. And then from here, I would right-click, transform, and reflect, and do a vertical reflection. Copy that, and have 2 shapes. And same thing, I'm going to overlap it to a point where I'm happy with its position. That looks nice. It should technically mirror properly because it's the same, and it did. There's a little overlap, and now I grab both shapes, and I'm going to unite them. Beautiful. I have this excellent shape. Now, the size of this is not proportional to my real, true scaled 1-to-1 board. If I click on this and I go to centimeters, it shows me that my height of my board is only 105. I wanted my board to be a 160. What I'm going to do here is make sure I have the constraint width and height proportions on my transform box linked in. Okay? So technically, once you get the shape and you have it proportioned, I'll type in 160 or 154, 157, whatever the length of your board is. It will automatically adjust proportionally the width as well. So now I have a board. Even though I used the internet image to get the proportions and line art of, it is now scaled properly to the size that I want it to be. Okay? Now, technically, you're arguing, well, if I were to enlarge this photograph, but you don't know the size of the photograph because you have all these pixels in the way. But technically, if I scale this up, this should fit inside my shape quite nicely. And it does. Okay? But you can't trust the photograph because it has a lot of pixels and riffraff that do not make it that scaled size. Okay, so there's my shape. I'll go my alignment tool. I'll bring this back here. I'll click on show features. I'm going to say to this board, align to the artboard to be center and center. Now, if you want the inside colored shape, this is what you do. You grab a big rectangle, you click and drag it. Okay? For demonstration purposes, I will just change the color to something else. Okay? So technically, I have two shapes. And I'll just right click and arrange this to the back so you can see. So, doing the cookie color method, I call it, is when you have a shape and you want to trim another shape, select both, and make sure it's expanded, but this already is because I did it already, and just divide. Object, ungroup. I'm going to trim the excess dough, and then the inside is the shape that I want. This is great if you're doing clipping masks or other things like that. Okay. Now, that's how I would start up my board. In terms of the design, well, you're going to use your skills and your tools that you know in Illustrator to type tool, pen tool, brush tool, pattern tool, paintbrush tool with a pattern. So if I have my brushes open, I can use some of the default brushes. I can go to the brush library and pick different types of brushes if you want a style there. Okay. And when you're brushing on Illustrator, it's very similar to Photoshop, but it's kind of vector based. Let's get a stroke. Okay. This has a vector path, but the appearance of a bitmap. Okay. These are some really cool things. If you wanted to, you could do some blend and variations. I'm going to increase the thickness of this. Go to object, and I'll expand the appearance, so this thing is now a vector. I will then weld it together as one shape. I'll do the same for this one. And I can do some cool blending with my blend tool. I'll say multiple shapes. Steps here. 8, sure. And then I'll make it. If I want it further apart, I'll just distance it with my direct selection tool. And you get more gaps. Remember also this blend tool, if you wanted to, you can also expand it as well. It'll separate them, and then you can ungroup them, and you can pick and choose which one you want. And you can also create a manual alignment where if I grab this shape here and these shapes, I can go to the alignment tool and say, based on the selection, let's distribute these evenly between the first and the last one. Okay? And you can also left justify and do some cool things that way. Now, clipping mask, guys, you should know how to do this. But if you don't, grab the shape. In this case, I'm going to press Command C here. Go onto this layer and press Command F. So with this shape on top of these shapes, I'm just going to group these. Command X, Command F. I'm holding Shift and clicking multiple shapes. Since it's all grouped, all those got selected. So Object, Clip Mask, and Make. The shape on top masks the shapes below. So then you can see what those lines look like inside a clip mask. Very similar to the lesson I showed you in Photoshop. Okay. Anyways, guys, that's how you size your board and get started. Use layers if you want to see Like say you want to have your text graphics, your brand, your set screws, or your channel. You can put that in different layers and design accordingly. Okay, I'm going to sign off.